name is Martine Oglethorpe and the creator of The Modern Parent. I'm the mother to 5 gorgeous boys and a baby girl no longer with us. My boys are 12, 11, 9, 3 and 18 months. I have a particularly amazing husband and kids, but yes, that means I'm outnumbered 6 to 1. Our house is often loud and crazy, but most of the time it kind of works. When I'm not running around to cricket, football, athletics, basketball, golf, swimming, tumble tots, kinder and school drop-offs, I love to work on my blog and business. In the olden days I was a school teacher, and more recently I completed my Masters in Counselling. I'm also a passionate photographer and the Victorian representative for Heartfelt, a charity organisation that takes photos of stillborn and critically ill babies and children. My family are my world, but I love having interests outside the home, and I love the excuse to get away from it all with the odd conference or two. I have been known to indulge in a little karaoke, and I still hold aspirations of being a rock star. If not, I'll happily settle for all that I have right now.
A week after my 4.5-month-old daughter Ava passed away, I went to the beach with my husband and her brothers. I started writing. I guess you could call it a journal, a reflection of the past month's events, an outpouring of grief and raw emotion, and a question as to where I would go from here. Nobody's seen those words. In fact, I haven't reread those words myself. What it did do, however, was to remind me of how I loved to write. It reminded me of the therapeutic nature of putting our thoughts into some semblance of order, or at least getting the words temporarily out of my head. I was never going to find meaning in those words, but I now know they gave me some foggy inkling of direction. I then began sourcing other people's stories. I needed to hear the words of others who had lost a child. I needed to know I would survive, and I wanted to hear that others laughed again, because I wanted to laugh again. I couldn't bear losing that too, and I couldn't afford to do that to my 3 remaining boys and the 2 more beautiful boys that would follow. And whilst I didn't feel like it at the time, I knew I had to live a life that would make Ava proud, a life that would make my boys proud. And I wanted them to know that sometimes life deals you a pretty crappy hand, but we must always choose to play it to the best of our ability. So as I read other stories, I began to see a shred of hope and a glimmer of light, and I heard those faint sounds of laughter again. I began to see how one day those stories could be mine. Unfortunately, I had the experience, but I also knew I had the empathy, the means, and the support needed to help others. So it was at this time that I enrolled to do my Masters in Counselling. I learned the theories, I acted out the role plays, I sat the exams, I wrote the essays and muddled my way through the academic jargon and footnotes and the bloody bibliographies that took more time to perfect than the actual words of the essay. But most of all, in learning to help others, I learnt more about helping myself. I began counselling adolescents, which invariably led to counselling their parents. I saw many similar problems arising, the same tensions, the same fights, the same stress and the same misunderstandings. Now, family tension and parent-adolescent fighting is certainly nothing new, and nor is it something that can or should be eradicated anytime soon. But this gulf of understanding between being a child and a parent today seemed to be gnawing away at the foundations of these families. There appeared to be very little joy for parent or child. I hated the thought of these families wasting so much precious time and energy in a state of sadness and distress. I now knew how precious every day we have with our children is. It became increasingly obvious that the landscape upon which we were parenting had left many unprepared, and the environment our kids were growing up in was so vastly different to ours that we needed to ensure we could stay in the race. We could apply the same values, the same principles and beliefs that have long stood the test of time. We just needed to tweak our understanding. So now I had lots of ideas, lots of notes, lots of thoughts and lots of words all floating around inside my head. I was a jumbled mess of ideas, emotions and theories all stored in the files of my MacBook and in loose-leaf folders and printouts on my increasingly cluttered office/dining table. About this time I met a new friend in the coffee shop. I noticed that her husband spent a lot of time in the same coffee shop, working on a laptop and drinking lattes. "What is it your husband does all day?" I inquired. "He's a professional blogger," she replied, and probably waited expectantly for the look of quizzical curiosity on my face, which I must say more than likely eventuated. I then answered with the now all too familiar and subsequently embarrassing, "Is that a real job?" I went and Googled the said blogger and realised he did know a thing or two about blogging, so I got hold of his book on how to start a blog, and I started a blog. At last, I had somewhere to store these resources, organise these thoughts, categorise these theories, and vent these emotions. And the memory of my little girl was all I needed for my inspiration. Grief, as we know, has no rules. There is no start and end date. There is no psychotherapeutic formula or 10-step program to work through. It hits you at bizarre times. It is haphazard, ever-changing, and ruthless. A song or a scent can throw you hurtling back into raw devastation within seconds. And the pain of the feeling leaves you wondering how you have managed to survive. Am I really okay? Or have I been living in complete denial? But then your other child asks for help with their homework, or cricket training's about to start, or a nappy needs changing, and you're back nagging at sons number 2 and 4 to once again stop throwing balls in the house. And once again, you are reminded of how you keep moving forward. You're not in denial, you're just pushing it back a little later to deal with it. And for me, that later sometimes comes in the form of writing. Sometimes it's about Ava and grief, but mostly it's about how to enjoy the families that we have. I'm grateful to know that I can help myself and others create a family life that is, for the most part, happy. Calling my blog The Modern Parent obviously suggests that it was to be a parenting blog, and I hope that it is recognised as a blog that merges the personal experience I have as a mother of 5 boys and a baby girl no longer with us, with the professional work I've done as an educator and counsellor. My blog seeks to arm parents with the necessary information, skills and strategies to help them on their parenting journey, but I aim to do so with a pretty big dose of reality. The research I have weighed up with my own experiences and decided whether it's worth sharing. It's easy to listen to the experts and say this is how we should parent. We all know how we should parent, but the hard part is often putting it into practice. I hope my own experiences with boys that are all different ages and stages of development helps to ensure that I'm able to practice what I preach and let you know just what does and doesn't work for me. My friends and family often have a laugh and are only too happy to point out my less than magical parenting moments, wondering if the failed incidents will make it to my blog. I then remind them that if they read my blog, they would know that I am by no means a perfect parent. I do, however, have a pretty good time with my family. A combination of positive role models, my own upbringing, my professional training and a myriad of personal experiences have enabled me to have a pretty clear picture of how I want my family life to look. Writing the blog has led me to many opportunities, and the popularity of posts on parenting and technology has allowed me to niche myself even further. I've now begun speaking to parent groups, kinders and schools to help them understand the modern world of technology and what that means in terms of the way we parent. We don't need to change our values, our beliefs or our basic principles of how we parent, but we do need to make an attempt to understand the world in which our children are growing up in. My life has taken many turns since Ava died. I know I wouldn't have started my blog, and certainly not my business either. I know I wouldn't have the same understanding of myself that I do now, and I wouldn't have the same empathy I do with others either. I know that I wouldn't have the same opportunities that I've been fortunate to have, and I certainly wouldn't be standing up here today. And for that, I will be forever grateful and will continue to make her proud.